Hi, my name is Tim Lindquist. I'm a professor in the software engineering program at Arizona State University, and this video is supporting our course on mobile systems, mobile app development, SER423. And in this video we want to talk about the using maps with Android. There's another video that explains using map kit for iOS, and we want to compare that today with the way that it's done in Android. This material is contained in unit number 10 of the schedule for the class. There are a couple of reading references associated with it, and in particular one section on adding maps and another one on building apps with location and maps. And I want to refer you to look at those. They go through the specific steps that we're going to look at in a simple example. And that example is also posted on the same page, same unit, Android map of asu.jar. So I'm going to download it, and we'll get it up and running, and then just spend a few minutes talking about the particulars of getting it to work on your system. So the setup for doing maps in Android is, there are more steps involved for the developer than there are in iOS. In iOS, it's very straightforward. You just do the map kit and go from there. But in Android, it actually has quite a few more steps involved. In this example, when you download the example and read it and run it, I think you'll see I tried to do my best in the comments section of the project to explain in pretty good detail what the steps are. They're also included in the documentation and the readings, but hopefully you'll see them in the comments as well. So I'm just getting the thing started up here. And you'll see Android Studio coming up, and we're opening up that project. When you download the project, what I've intentionally done to take the extra steps, instead of using my version of it, I've downloaded it to show you what you'll see when you get it. After it gets through, sometimes I know when you open up the projects there's a difference between the version of Gradle. So here, instant run update. So that's changed since I developed this example. But generally speaking, you shouldn't have any problems getting it to run on your version of Android Studio. And when it does finish with all of the Gradle stuff, I want to show you the comments that I'm talking about. So if you go to the main activity and look at the comments section in the main activity, you'll see the 4 different steps that are defined here in order to get this example to run on your machine. And probably the first thing that you need to do is with the SDK manager, the software development kit manager under Android Studio's Tools, Android SDK manager. You want to go under the SDK Tools, and there you'll find the Google Play services. You can see I've got version 39 loaded here. You want to make sure that those have already been downloaded and installed onto your device. And pardon me, and then you also want to follow the directions here for going and getting an API key. The API key goes into the manifest. So if you open up the Android manifest.xml in the project under the manifest folder, you'll see under the value for metadata within the application element a note that your key goes here. And let me actually put my key in there. So in any event, you place your key in there, and then after you've done that, the project should run. So let me actually, Android Map ASU, here's the other one. This one I think probably already has my key in it. And let's go ahead and run it. So one of the other steps involved is to make sure that you have a virtual device that is configured to have the Google APIs in it, which include the mapping APIs. If you don't have those mapping APIs, it'll just terminate. It does give you, interestingly, if you're running it in the emulator, it gives you a message that says you have to have an Android emulator that includes the Google APIs. In order to do that, you have to go back under the Tools, Android Virtual Device, and configure a new virtual device that in the steps for doing that, it gives you the option, if they aren't already downloaded, to download them for the emulator and install them as a part of that emulator. So I've got them already running here in this version of the emulator. So I'm starting up the emulator, and we'll see how this one runs. This one, as I said, I've already placed the API key in the Android manifest file for this one. It's mine, so I went out and got one well, actually for the department, but that's okay. But in fact, you should get one individually. And you can see when it loads the map, it shows you that in fact there are 3 different places. This is the location for ASU's Polytechnic campus, ASU's, well, for the Brickyard, the lat lawn for the Brickyard in Tempe, and then also the lat lawn for ASU West. So it's kind of a map of ASU's computing programs. We have computing programs on the Poly campus, on the Tempe campus, and also on the West campus. So how does all of that happen? So the other thing I'll point out before we get away from all it is a single one view app, but there is the ability to do long touches and to recognize them. So if you want to do a new place, then in fact you do a long touch on the map, very similar to the look and feel of maps of Google Maps anyway. It causes a dialog to pop up to give it the name. So there's the name I'm entering, Carefree, Arizona. And now you see there's a new place denoting that. Same thing with iOS. When you click on a place, it centers that place, and then it gives you a label which indicates what that place is. So all of that is demonstrated in, how you do that is demonstrated in the code. And we'll just take a very quick look at it. In the code, so this is the main activity. I guess before doing that, let's, because there's other stuff associated with it, there is the XML layout file for it. Map fragments come as a fragment. We talked about fragments earlier in the course. They're a small snippet of user interface that you can use if several different views in your app require the same, maybe it's a search, it's the most common thing, then in fact you can put them into a fragment and then use that fragment from several different views. Well, maps are the same thing. They're placed into a map fragment, and that's the only thing that's in this particular view within Android support constraint. Constraint layout, that's one of the last things we'll talk about is constraint. I didn't change it. It doesn't matter whether it's a relative view or a linear view. The point is that there's a fragment for the map fragment. So that I point out as the layout. So that's where our user interface comes from. And in the onCreate, that user interface gets sucked in and rendered in the set content view, right? R.layout main activity, as I'm showing you there. And in order to provide a model for it, here are the names and the lat lawns for ASU Poly, ASU Brickyard, and ASU West. And they're just placed into a hash map so that they can be referred to when the callback occurs that the map has actually been created. We then get the fragment for the map. Map fragment, so I'm creating an object called map fragment, which is get fragment manager, find the fragment by ID, r.id.map, which is the ID that's in that XML file we just looked at. And then the only other thing that takes place in onCreate is to initiate the rendering of the map, right? So get map async is a quick call, right? Comes back right away. But in fact, the map won't appear until it gets through rendering that map, which may take connectivity. It may even fail if there's no connectivity between the phone and the internet. But nevertheless, when it comes back, by virtue of the fact that we are implementing the interface on MapReady callback, when it is rendered, it will make a call to onMapReady. And onMapReady, read that method if you would, but that gets called when the map renders. This is the one that actually places the markers. So it calls an add marker method to place those new markers on it, and those are the markers that show the places of Poly, Brickyard, and ASU West. And then it centers and sets the scale of the map. And actually, the last thing I want to point out, the long touch is in there as well, but let's not go back to the code. Let's very quickly, let me point you to, so you can see here are the different directions for what you need to do and to get ready with the maps. And then there is a section on map of the marker, set the current place, and section here that indicates to you indicates the different perspective. Well, I'm not finding it right now. Let's see if we can just describe it for you. So what happens with Google is that the view that is rendered in your on your app is one that is hypothetically from a camera that's sitting above a flat map of the world. And if you envision that camera, it can actually be at different angles. So you can set the angle at which the view occurs, and you can also set the rotation of the view as well, which is a little different than the controls that are available for iOS. Common with iOS, you have the ability to set the zoom level, which kind of indicates how close it is. And with Android, you'll see in the documentation that depending upon whether you set the zoom level at 1 or 20, you're either at level 1 going to be looking at a flat projection of the entire world, or at level 20 you're going to be looking at streets, right? So you have those three different components on which to set the camera's aspect and also its angle as well. And those are actually taken care of in this camera update factory new camera position, where you have to specify a latitude and a longitude of the center point. But then you also specify the zoom level and then these two angles, right? The angle in terms of with the angle that it's looking at, whether it's looking straight down or whether it's at a tilt, as well as the rotation for it as well. And those are taken care of with those last two float elements. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that, and what I'd like to do is the next thing that we're going to talk about after looking at maps. I'm not going to do a video on the media player, but the next section that we'll be doing in terms of videos will be on the preference section.